April 2024. Something changed in Togo. The streets of Lomé, usually calm, erupted in rage. Protests spread like wildfire, from the capital to the central cities of Sokode, Kara, and beyond. Youth marched, mothers shouted, workers abandoned their posts. The air was thick with tear gas, and something more powerful, resistance. What sparked this fury? A law? A quiet vote? A constitutional reform passed in parliament without the people's voice? A reform that would let Gnassingbé, already in power for nearly 20 years, remain for decades more. A move that would change Togo's entire system of governance, from a presidential democracy to a parliamentary trap where four could be reappointed without a single vote. To many Togolese, it felt like the final betrayal. A betrayal not just of law, but of the dream of democracy. On paper, the change sounded like reform. Parliament would gain more power. The role of the president would become more ceremonial. Stability would be ensured, they said. But behind the legal language was a strategy, a way for the ruling elite to stay in power indefinitely. Under the new rules, the president would no longer be directly elected by the people. Instead, the National Assembly, heavily dominated by Force Party, would choose him. And guess who holds a vast majority in that assembly? For Gnassingbe's party. It was a constitutional coup. Quiet, legal, and devastating. No announcement, no referendum, just signatures on paper, and a nation betrayed overnight. Within hours, outrage spilled onto the streets. In Lomé, thousands of protesters surged toward the parliament building. Young men and women carried signs reading, "No to monarchy. Power belongs to the people. Togo is not your kingdom." Tear gas canisters hissed. Riot police blocked roads with shields and rubber bullets. Opposition leaders called it the death of democracy. In Sokoda, known for its history of resistance, people flooded mosques and town squares, chanting "Togo Debout, Togo, rise." In Kara, for a stronghold, the protests were smaller, but the whispers louder. A nation once subdued by fear was now roaring with frustration, and the message was clear: we've had enough. Among the placards and protest chants, one phrase began to appear over and over again: join the AES, AES, Alliance of Sahel States. The young Togolese knew the names by heart: Traoré in Burkina Faso, Goïta in Mali, Tchiani in Niger. They were seen not as dictators, but as liberators. Men who stood up to foreign dominance. Men who ended French military influence. Men who said, Africa first. Now Togo's youth looked north and saw a blueprint, a path forward, a rebellion that didn't wait for permission. They painted AES flags next to the Togolese tricolor. They sang the Sahel anthem at protest gatherings. They tweeted, "Togo must break free." One video went viral, a young protester shouting into a camera. Mali said no, Burkina said no, Niger said no. Why is Togo still on its knees? This wasn't just anger, this was awakening. University students organized sit-ins. Farmers staged blockades in rural roads. Even public sector workers threatened strikes. The opposition, once fractured, began speaking with one voice. Civil society groups, many of whom had kept low profiles for years, now published fiery statements. Religious leaders began calling for national dialogue. Some even hinted that the people had the right to defend the republic from tyranny. What began as protest was becoming a movement. A Pan-African consciousness was settling over the country. The message wasn't just down with Traoré. It was something far bigger. Africa is changing, and we will not be left behind. As the protests grew louder, the regime reacted the only way it knows how: force. Within days, armored trucks rolled through Lomé. Men in black uniforms stormed activist homes at midnight. Journalists reporting on the protests were beaten. Some disappeared. Mobile networks slowed. WhatsApp and Telegram groups were targeted. Facebook live streams were cut mid-sentence. The message from the government was clear. We are still in control. But fear no longer worked like it once did. Each crackdown only poured fuel on the fire. Even grandmothers in Lomé's markets whispered, "This is the end. They're losing grip." The more they suppressed, the more the people organized on the ground. And quietly, a dangerous question spread. If peaceful protest is denied, is it time for something stronger? In moments like this, you expect the world to speak, to condemn the violence, to call for dialogue. But this time, silence. France, once so eager to defend democracy in West Africa, made no statement. The IU, always ready with election observers, looked away. ECOWAS, which sanctioned Mali and Niger for coups, refused to speak out against Faré's constitutional manipulation. Why? Because this time, the challenge is not just against one leader, it is against an entire system. A system that allowed certain families and foreign powers to rule unchecked for decades. And if Togo breaks free, if the wave reaches the Gulf of Guinea, it means even coastal allies of the West are no longer safe. To them, Togo's resistance is contagion. To the people, it is courage. In every uprising, the military becomes the hinge. And in Togo, the cracks are beginning to show. The Presidential Guard remains loyal. They've been trained, paid, and fed by the state for years. But lower-ranking officers, mid-level commanders, that's where the whispering starts. Many in the army come from the same neighborhoods as the protesters. They have cousins in the marches, mothers crying in the streets, friends silenced by the regime. Some veterans have begun leaking messages online, urging soldiers not to fire on civilians. One anonymous captain posted, "We swore to protect the nation, not a single man." The situation grows more fragile by the day, because in West Africa, when the army refuses to obey unjust orders, regimes fall overnight. The chants are no longer just protest, they are proposals, visions, demands. Join the Sahel, break from ECOWAS, ditch the CFA franc, stand with Mali and Burkina Faso. To the Togolese youth, the AES is not chaos, it is clarity, a bloc of nations charting their own future, without begging in Paris, without saluting foreign flags, without apologizing for being African. If Togo joins the AES, it could reshape West Africa's balance of power. Military cooperation between Sahel states and Togo economic realignment, away from the CFA franc cultural unity through Pan-Africanism. A single voice in the face of foreign manipulation. Togo wouldn't just be joining a bloc, it would be stepping into history. A chance to say, we were once ruled by fear, but we chose freedom and stood with the new Africa. Fauré Gnassingbé has a choice. Step down or hold on tighter. If he doubles down, tightens the grip, expands the crackdown, floors the streets with soldiers, he may buy himself time. Weeks, months, maybe years. But history has never been kind to leaders who silence their people. Ask those who ruled in silence in Guinea. Ask the fallen strongmen of Burkina Faso. Ask the ghosts of toppled regimes in Sudan, Libya, and Tunisia. The harder he presses, the louder the people will roar. Already the whispers of defiance are reaching inside the palace walls. Already his name no longer commands reverence. It stirs resentment. The protests may slow, but the idea has already escaped. That Togo belongs to its people, not its president. This is bigger than one law, bigger than one family, bigger than one country. This is the Sahel spirit spreading like wildfire. It says, we will no longer be ruled without our consent. We will no longer serve foreign masters. We will define our own destiny. Across the continent, the youth are waking up, not with weapons but with wisdom. not just with anger, but with vision. A vision of an Africa that stands tall, that controls its own currency, that builds its own security, that honors its culture, its people, its strength. In 2023, it was Niger. In 2022, it was Burkina Faso. In 2021, it was Mali. And in 2025, it may be Togo's turn. They called it a ripple, then a protest, then a rebellion. Now, there's a wave that crashes through broken systems, that washes away corruption, that drowns dynasties and lifts up nations. And now, that wave has reached the shores of Lomé. The question is no longer if Togo will rise. The question is whether its leaders will hear before it's too late. The Sahel spirit is no longer just in the desert. It is here, it is alive, and it is unstoppable. You've been watching Pan-African Hub, where Africa speaks for herself. If this story moved you, then don't just watch. Stand with us. Subscribe for more bold African stories the mainstream won't tell. Like the video to support the movement. Share and hit the notification bell so you never miss a voice from the new Africa. Because this is only the beginning.